Welcome to the Spin Axis podcast. I'm Erik Barzeski.
I'm Jayson Nickol.
Yeah, I'm Tyson Deskins.
This week we're going to talk about feels versus mechanics. I was at the open forum at the PGA show, and I asked quasi-instructor, we'll put it that way, whether he taught mostly with feels, mostly with mechanics, what a lesson looked like at first. He said, 100% feels. Everyone is a feel player. That's the only way I have to communicate with a player. I was a little surprised by that. I've talked to several other instructors that I like, and they seem to align a little bit more with me. But let me ask you guys first before we get into that. Do you teach feels or mechanics?
It's a good question.
Yeah, I would say I don't know how to teach feels because I don't feel like anybody else feels. I think we're all feel players, but we all feel differently. Jayson?
I would, how do I put this?
That's a good one.
I want to change the mechanics so that the player feels the change. Does that make sense?
Sure.
Like I'm looking to make a mechanical change.
Sure. I mean, we have 20 minutes to talk about it, so.
Thanks for listening.
Yeah. Because what I feel, and we're out.
Yeah, you don't need to have a perfect answer right now.
Because what I feel is going to be completely different to what this person feels. Now, I can always go like, here is my feel.
Yes.
That's just another way of me going like, okay, I want to make this change. And there are people that are definitely more externally focused. And you got to coach them a little bit different. I had a guy today where it was like, okay, we had been working really hard on a couple, let's say, key concepts of like of the mechanics of the golf swing. But whenever he tried to get that out onto the golf course, it just fell apart. And I was like, okay, my bad. I'm sorry. Let's take a little time out here. What are your feels? And he's like, What do you mean? What are you feeling when you're going to hit a golf shot? And he's like, well, I'm trying to like stop my right foot. And then I want to make sure that stop is going to get my like pressure to shift early. And then I want to feel like my arms go up. And I was like, this is not good. This is going to continue, isn't it? And he's like, yes. I'm like, that's not a feel.
Yeah.
Like a feel is like, you feel like rhythm, or you feel like you move the club head off the golf ball and then, you're hitting the middle of the club face, or you feel like your arms brush your side. That's a feel. And everyone can have slightly different feels, and your feels are going to change constantly all the time. And that's the biggest one that I tell people is because if your feels never changed, whoever won their first golf tournament before they got any older would just continue winning golf tournaments. Like when Rory won all those majors as a kid, if his feels for that never left, he would have 85 majors. I don't know if there was enough of that yet, but
right. I don't know if he's played 85 majors since then, but sure.
Yeah. But it just like the feels the best way that I can tell people, and I heard this from another coach, and I can't remember who it was, sadly, is that feels aren't real and they're going to leave you. They are rented, not owned.
Rented, not owned is new. Yeah, feel ain't real is a very common saying in golf. I feel like every time one of us says, I had a student today, my daughter's ears perk up because she was interested to see if we rip on somebody. Sorry, Natalie.
Sorry, Elena.
Jayson was mostly ripping on himself there. See,
yeah, that's right.
It wasn't anything the student had done wrong. Feels are rented, not owned is what I agree. My lessons, I would tend to say, I show someone the mechanics that I want to change because the mechanics are how we hit the ball. You can feel like you're doing whatever. You can feel like you're doing this or that or whatever. If your mechanics don't change, your ball striking doesn't change. The way you hit the ball doesn't change. So the mechanics are just the movement. It's how we move. It's what we do to move the golf club, move our bodies, etc. How we hit the golf ball. That's all the mechanics are. So if I show someone the mechanics, and I'll do it at slow speed, and I'll say, okay, we want to exaggerate this one and do this with our right arm or left knee or whatever. It's not super technical. I think a lot of people think mechanics is technical.
Absolutely.
And it doesn't have to be super technical.
Nope.
It can be, we want to do this like that. That's it. That's all it is. What does that feel like to you?
Exactly.
Yeah. And I think we all have some built-in feels that seem to resonate with a lot of people at first. But yeah, I tell people, I said, okay, it feels like this right now. But in 2 weeks, if it stops working, quote unquote, you need to do the motion again, see what it feels like that week, and derive your feels from doing the mechanics the right way. And I think even the golfing machine says you should derive your feels from the mechanics, essentially.
Yeah. Yeah. I always tell players, I don't teach by feels because feelings are always fleeing. They're always leaving us. Again, feelings are always fleeing. And what I feel like in my right arm today probably is not going to be what it feels like in another month, even though I might want it to feel like that. So to Erik's point, having some feedback and making sure that you're doing the mechanical piece correct And then you can sort of derive what that feels like in the moment. And hopefully that lasts, but it might not last. It might be gone tomorrow. It might last for a month. That's the hard part about feelings is you don't know how long that specific feeling is going to last or work for you to hit the ball well.
Everyone that's played golf long enough has had an aha moment on the range, and then they can't do it the next day.
Figured it
They
out.
can't do it the next day. The next day, it's gone. 5 swings later, sometimes it's gone.
That's right.
Yeah. There was, it was the beginning of last year. My first 3 rounds of golf were all under 70s. And I had a feel, and I was, this is it. This is going to be the year. I'm going to be like a +4 handicap. And then after that, it was like 76, 78, 79. Even though the feel was the exact same, it just didn't resonate anymore. And that's a span of like two months. And like Erik said, sometimes it's 2 days, especially if you go on like a guy's trip, that, or golf trip for all your ladies out there. Sorry, I probably should stop saying that, but you're going to go out there and you're going to what I usually see is that first day, it's like your warm up. Second day is usually your best round or third day. But then after that, it's like downhill. Now your body's starting to get tight. And that feel that you had for you, well, that was when your body was prime, when it was moving its best. It's no longer moving its best. You had a couple too many beverages. You didn't get to sleep in time. You woke up too early and you've golfed, 54 holes in 2 days. That feel needs to be different. People are like, oh, I could just hold on to this. It's like, no, now the mechanic is different. The feel needs to be different because your body's moving differently.
And I think both of you probably would agree. And I used to listen to my dad tell players all the time, when you have a feel or something, you figure something out, write it down. Back in the day, he would be like, write it down. In today's world, we can just put a note on our phone, right? Have a file on our phone of notes. And he always used to tell people, to write it down because it is going to disappear. You are going to lose it, but that doesn't mean that same feel somewhere down the road can't work for you again, And again, it's we as just a human being, a living organism, we are constantly changing every second of the day, our blood pressure, our adrenaline, the emotional response that we have to this game. Within all that, all of your feelings change. And again, to your guys' point, there's definitely times in a lesson I will have a player in front of me and I'll be trying to get them to do a certain move. And I will say, if I'm a betting man, it might feel like this. Does it feel like that or doesn't it? Right? I'm always looking for the feedback from the player. Because sometimes I might be right. And if I'm right and I can nudge them the right way, maybe I get them to the end result a little bit quicker.
Yeah. At the end of every one of my in-person lessons, I shoot a video, right? I set up my camera down the line and we go over everything that we did in the lesson. And your lessons, if you're getting in-person lessons, should have something like this where it's like, here's what's happened. Here's what we worked on today. Here's your movements. When you watch yourself, this is what you're looking for. And then I have the player then tell me what their feels are whilst they're doing that movement. So then they have a visual of what they're doing, right? So if they need to go back and rewatch it, now they've got how the body's moving, so the mechanics. And then 2, at least gives them their feel for that movement right now so that hopefully when they leave and they go work on it, then they can go back and watch the film and go like, this is what it should look like. And here's roughly what it should feel like. But like Tyson said, that might change. You might need to feel more, or if you're doing it to extreme, at some point you might need to feel less, and that's okay too. But you definitely need to know like, okay, here's where I am this week, and here's where I am, in 3 days, and 2 rounds into like a 4-day golf tournament. But if you don't have what the mechanics should look like, it's going to be hard to find that again. And that's again, you need some sort of, 3D motion capture or video or some sort of good data set. And going into other players, when you're hitting at your best, go see your coach, get video of that, right?
Get some
data.
data.
The more data you can get to that, the better, because it might be like a setup and all of a sudden you come in and, especially for you guys, I mean, like Erik, especially where you get, it's like, oh, well, yeah, you're playing your best right here where you've got, let's say 2 or 5 more degrees of like hip hinge that you have in your setup. And you're like, oh, really? And then you look back at like when they first came in the lessons, they were standing too upright. It's like, okay, perfect. And then so if they ever get off and they come back in and they're standing too upright again, it's like, oh, actually, here's the one where you're playing your best and you're a little more bent over, and then they get bent over and it's like, ooh, this feels really bent over. Well, it might need to feel like it's really bent over, but now all of a sudden you get that feel again within a couple, practice sessions or whatever, and then you start playing your best golf.
Yeah, I've had people that I try to very much caution them that their feels will change because, for example, if someone sets up with a ton of weight on their back foot, and then they move a ton of weight back even farther during their backswing, they might need to feel like they're 60-40 on their front foot or 70-30 at first. They might need to feel like they are 70-30 at first just to be fairly neutral. They might need to feel like they stay 70-30 during the backswing, even though they're still shifting a little to the right.
Absolutely.
But if they're not careful, in a month, they might actually be 70-30 during the backswing.
Yes.
Or 80-20. Right. So they need to understand the mechanics. They need to understand the limit of what they're trying to achieve, even if it's just literally not the mechanics, but like, what does it look like on a camera?
Yes.
Because how we move is the mechanics. So I'm using that term fairly loosely. They don't need to know, the antecubital fossa. They don't need to know terms like that.
Yeah.
Okay. Which is just your elbow pit. They don't need to know terms like that. They just need to know, what do I need to move like? What should it look like when I move the right way? And also, if you have like 3 little moves, let's say you roll it in a little too much, your trail elbow gets a little bit too far behind you, you kind of lift it up to the top, and then you tend to come over the top a little bit. Like that's your current pattern. Okay, so you feel like you lift your arms out away from you a little bit. You might feel a counter roll, even though you don't actually counter roll, just to stop you from rolling it underneath. You might have a feel that relates to each of those 3 things.
Yep.
That doesn't mean you can just say, oh, the third feel is not working anymore, because you have to do the first 2 for the third one to make any sense at all, right? So you can't just say, oh, I was playing good when I felt the third thing, I should do that again.
Right.
Maybe you're messing up the first 2.
That's right.
And so the third thing is if you just do the third thing that you need to feel, it might not work at all.
Yep.
Because you're not doing one of the first 2. Understanding the mechanics and the order of things is, to me, very important. And understanding that you derive your feels from those is very important. I was slightly gobsmacked by the person who answered this, because he has a bunch of things that measure a bunch of things. He understands, I believe, the mechanics very well. His lessons that I've seen are very mechanics based.
Yeah.
He will say, I want you to do this. This number is not where I want it to be. It's very much that stuff. It's not complicated. I'm not saying it's super technical.
Right.
But they are very much mechanics based lessons. So I felt like a lawyer who was unprepared, because they say don't ask a witness a question you don't already know the answer to. And I was expecting an answer. I got a totally different answer. I was like,
in the mouth.
Right. I was somewhat surprised. And feels are different for everyone, right? You said it. My feels are not their feels. I've told on the podcast, I think before, where I gave back-to-back lessons of the same mechanics, and the people had almost exactly opposite feels, and it worked for them.
Yep.
And that's fine. Who am I to tell them that their feel is wrong in that day? I'm going to say, okay, that's fine. That's your feel right now. Be aware that it might change. Here's the mechanics that we changed today. Here's why we changed them. Whatever feels produce those for you. Cool.
I was going to say the feels can be crazy. This is, I think most people, they struggle with the feels sometimes being
crazy. How? Like extreme?
Crazy
yes,
extreme.
I think we'd all agree on that. But crazy how?
Oh, like for instance, I had a guy Natalie. I had a guy in the other day, but I was like, okay, here's your movement. Obviously I've got all the videos up, and he's making the movement. And I was like, what does that feel like to you? And he's like, it feels like I shouldn't be able to make that move. Okay, perfect. Well, there's your feel. He's like, what? I'm like, I want you to feel like you don't think that you can make that move. Okay, I think I understand what you're trying to say. I'm like, all right. Give that to me at like 75% speed. It's perfect. Absolutely perfect. And he is just looking at the screen going, I can't believe that I hit the golf ball like that. It shouldn't do that. And I was like, well, right now, you just nailed down your exact feel to make your perfect golf swing, right? That ball literally didn't leave the line, landed on the line, went further than you ever thought it would at 75% speed. And he's like, yes. I'm like, there's your feel. Now that might maybe increase it or decrease it as you go. But right now it feels extreme. The hard part is that now you have 2 different habits, right? I've talked about this in the past. You have your old swing, which is a deeply ingrained habit. Under pressure, your brain is going to want to use that. You need to find comfort in the discomfort of trying out that new pattern. But this isn't something where you go from your lesson to playing in a match against your buddy for $5, because that is not going to transfer over there. You need to be able to go through the stages of speed and pressure through that. But again, you now at least have a feel to make a good motion that you can then slowly bring out there. But a lot of golfers they don't like the discomfort, so they just forget about it.
They like what they know. Like at the end of the day, they like what they know. They like comfortability. We don't like to be uncomfortable. It's not how our brain is designed. To Jayson's point, it might have to feel like just the complete opposite move for you to move the needle 1 inch. I think think we've talked about this many times. Most people, when we ask them as a coach to exaggerate a move, they never exaggerate it on their own. We have to make them slow down. We got to make them do it 10 times. We might have to get a little loud and forceful and be like, dude, what's happening here? I need you to exaggerate it. We might have to jump in and demonstrate the exaggeration, because we get so used to just how we move and being comfortable that it's hard to get out of that box. Would you guys agree with this? I think we probably all have a scratch player or a really, really low single digit handicap player who we would probably consider an outlier from a mechanics perspective. Their mechanics aren't necessarily how we would teach it, but it's ingrained and they're a pretty decent player. Those guys have very distinct and specific feels that work for that outlier type of move that, like Erik was saying earlier, the order of things are really, really important for that type of player. If the mechanics are maybe a little bit tighter, a little bit neater, maybe the feels can be simpler. Does that make sense to what I'm saying there?
Yep.
Yeah. I mean, my best player has got maybe one of the weakest grips that I have on all my students. And he came in and he's sending golf balls, and I'm looking at him and I'm going like, man, I'm going to post this on social media and people are going to rip, because all I talk about is how most golfers shouldn't have this grip because it's really bad for you. Then you look down the line and he has the most lead wrist flexion of all my students. And it's like, well, those match. I'm not touching those.
Yep.
Like, he's a great player. I'm not touching his grip. Why would I ever change that? Right. Everything else, all his timing is into that grip, into that wrist structure. Let's leave that. What other minor little tweak that we can do that's like going to get him to hit the golf ball 2 yards less offline? You know what I mean? Like, especially at that level, And so it's like, we find out that is, work on that. You don't change the blueprint for a player like that.
Yeah, I didn't know you taught Colin Morikawa.
That's exactly right. That's who came to mind for sure.
Yeah. I have one for you. Another student was watching this lesson. This is a long time ago. And a decent number of golfers, when you say across the line or laid off, for some reason they do the opposite direction.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Because I don't know if they're used to the club being in front of them. And so up here, they think like, oh, if I rotate it this way, it'll be more laid off, but they actually rotate it across the line. So I'm teaching a lesson. I forget which way they were, but let's pretend they were super laid off and I wanted them to feel like they were across the line. They felt like that was laying it off more. So they're at the top of their backswing and I'm like, all right, lay it off more. Because I was saying their feels to them.
Yes, right.
And the people are watching me and the guy's twisting it the other direction across the line. And I'm saying, lay it off more. There you go. Good. Right. But that was his feels in the moment.
Doesn't know what he's talking about.
The student knew what we were doing. They knew where they wanted the club to be. And I said, okay, this is strange, but I've seen this often enough that you're in like the 10% to just get it backward.
Yep.
Because it's behind you, maybe. I don't, it's not in front of you anymore. So fine. But like I got looks from someone further down the range and they work with me too. So I talked to them afterward. I was like, yeah, he's one of the 10% that feel it the other way. So, I mean, I was just saying what made sense to him in the moment, but
just went with it.
That's an example of like his feel was literally backwards of what I was telling him to do and what he was actually doing. But what am I going to do? That's what he had to feel in that moment to do it, to make the mechanics better. So I think we all teach with feels.
Yeah, for sure.
But they come from the players. They often don't come from us.
I completely agree. And I think also, as we're sitting here talking this thought has come to my mind many different times during this conversation. I don't think a lot of golfers are very good at knowing what they feel. They're so focused on trying to hit the ball. They're not even, they have zero awareness of what they feel. And so how can I tell them necessarily what to feel if they can't even tell me what they're feeling? Does that make sense?
True.
The one thing I have noticed a fair amount with that, so when students tell me that is like a green light to me that they're an external feel player.
Sure.
And that one can be hard. It's like golf coaches where we're like, all right, I want, this and I want that. And it's like, as soon as they hit a shot, I'm like, oh, great. What does that feel like? And they go, yeah. And I'm like, oh, it's okay. Like verbal, whatever pops to your head, just verbalize that. And they go, I don't feel anything. I'm like, oh, okay. All right. So you're instantly, I'm like, you're external. And knowing where you play your best golf is important. Like I am very much of an internal, like I need to feel like my body is doing something. When I go external, it's like shit bad golf shots. Like if I'm like, let me just swing out a little bit more to the right. Nope, that's not good. I have no idea where my body is. And then on the flip side, that guy, he's very external. It's like, oh, hit that golf ball this way, brush that grass there, feel like, you're starting the ball on this line. And they can self-organize like that because they're, less aware isn't the right word. It's just obviously a different, brave way path. Yeah. Right. But once you hear those words, it's like, oh yeah, I got to flip where we're going into that lesson, because now it's like, you need to teach the person in front of you, just like Erik was talking about. It's like, oh, this guy is backwards, right? We got to go like, oh, here. So the next time you're out practicing, try it out. Try an external thought, try a neutral thought, try an internal thought, and see, like, test yourself. Which way do you hit the golf ball?
Try an existential thought.
Yeah. Don't do drugs though. That was on the last podcast.
That was last episode.
That's my bad. Hopefully everyone was for that. Here for that one.
Please listen to the previous episode. Yeah. I think we can end this almost by saying we're all field players. Can we derive our feels from proper mechanics for us, for each the individual? And
right, everyone in the world is a field player.
That's exactly right.
But your feels are unique to you. If we had dials and switches and knobs and levers, a golf lesson would cost $50,000, and you'd go one time and they'd dial in the right swing, and then you'd leave, and that'd be it.
Doesn't work like that, unfortunately. I've never.
No, it doesn't work like that.
Never charged that much for a lesson.
No.
Well, thanks for listening. Be a good listener and share your great feelings on this episode with all of your friends and buddies. Make sure you share on social media. We'll see you next time.
You can find us on all social medias at thespinaxis.com.
You don't buy beer, you only rent it.
See ya.